Well, good morning, team. How is everybody this morning? Good morning, Chewy. Good morning, George.
Morning.
Good morning. Happy
It's-
Anzac weekend.
Yeah, it's Tuesday. It's another short week. Yeah, excuse me, because we've just had one of those setup shows today where everything. I was literally sending emails, which is why I'm not looking at the camera. I'm still actually doing work at the same time. Literally sending emails at 3 minutes to literally sending emails. Look, there's me echoing as well. To kind of get us going and get us ready and get our show up and running today. So it's a bit flustering, but we're here now and we're feeling good about ourselves. How was your weekend, guys? Tell me about your weekend. That's giving me 60 seconds to do some more work.
Not much on my end. Obviously, I worked all the way through, but at least I have Anzac Day off and the next 2 days off. So now's my weekend.
Yeah. So that's been quite good for you because you normally get Tuesdays, Wednesdays off, which means you've had Tuesday, Wednesday. So you've had like some wicked weeks because Mondays have been off for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying to one of my colleagues, it's going to be weird to do a full week because it's just like, oh, you work and then you got 2 days off and then you work again and then another day off and then you work that one and then 2 days off and then have another 2 days off.
It is a bizarre thing when you run your own business. It's like there's never time off. You have to actually kind of go, I will put my computer down. I have my studio in the basement of my house. I'm like, sometimes I have to bring my laptop here, lock it in here. I mean, I obviously could come and get it, but just to give myself a break from what's been going on. What about you, George? Are you still on term break from your work at the university?
No, back into it today. So yeah, the week off was quite good because I didn't actually do any university work. Over the weekend. I went to Kaitangata down the road near Milton.
Mm-hmm.
My mate has a house there, and so and it's like a nice old villa. Kaitangata is beautiful. It reminds me of the coast, the way that it rains out there and it smells like coal out there. And yeah, we just fucking partied. It was mean, not many neighbors around. And I got to also, very special for me, I got to drive there and back in my mate's car, driving the boys and girls, which is, pretty full on for me. You got the urban sort of highway at the start, then the sort of rural highway, and then the back roads going from like Milton to Kaitangata, which are like windy and stuff. So I got a full sort of array of different environments to go driving on my learner's license.
I actually meant to bring up a video I was going to show you guys about what we got up in the weekend, including watching seals play in the surf. I did a smaller version of it because I haven't brought up the full video. I'll just show you the shorter version. This is out in Long Beach, so it's about 30 minutes east of Dunedin. This is what I got up to for a portion of the weekend.
And there's a place that I've dreamed of.
That's not a seal, that's a dog.
You can't quite see it, but right about there is a seal playing in the surf.
Damn.
What an awful place we live in.
Yeah.
No,
so that's one of the things I got up to in the weekend for a wee while. I mean, that was a pretty stunning day out at the beach, but that was just a drive out, take the little ginger mutt for here she comes with her favorite thing in the whole wide world, which is the ball. And you can see just jam packed with people, not. So yeah, that was one of the things I got up to the weekend that's gone as well. Long weekend.
Nice.
So today on the show, we've got a few things coming up that we're going to talk about. We are going to have someone from the Taxpayers Union coming on shortly, because we wanted to talk a little bit about the National Party's plan for tax, and an interview in the weekend just gone between Jack Tame and National Leader Chris Luxon. Later on today, we do want to talk a bit about Anzac Day, and I think, Chewy, you've got some things you want to share.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we've actually got the official title is the President of the RSA, BJ Clark, coming on as well about 11:45 to have a talk to us about Anzac Day. The Anzac Day is an interesting one because I think most people would agree that armed conflict and war is not a good thing, but then we also kind of celebrate / commemorate, maybe is a better word, / remember people who have gone and fought and died in wars to quote unquote protect us. And I know there'll be some people who sort of disagree with that comment, full stop, but it's the time to talk about it. And we were looking to have someone from the Peace and Conflict study group on from Otago University. We haven't managed to connect with someone, unfortunately. So we have ended up just having a chat with the RSA instead, because there is that conversation to be had, which is, if we kind of think that war is and generally is bad, and a peaceful resolution is always better, well, what do you do when Russia walks into Ukraine? You can't just do nothing. So what do you do? But anyway, we'll have the RSA on in a little while as well. So should we get into Twitter, guys? I think it might be a nice place to start, because we've been talking about this a couple of times for the last few weeks, because Mr. Musk obviously has been making noises towards wanting to buy Twitter. And overnight, in fact, we were talking, George and I were talking yesterday on the shared document about, what do we do about this whole Twitter conversation? It seems we should continue it and continue it on, because Elon is still making noises about trying to buy Twitter. He did a very clever tweet in the last few days pointing out that the board of Twitter didn't really own many shares, meaning they're making financial decisions for investors when they're not really investors themselves. Now, I don't think that's true, because if you own 0.03% of Twitter, or the shares, that might still be hundreds of thousands of shares. But the way he put it out there was very clever, and he somewhat snookered them. Wake up this morning to find that Elon has bought Twitter, the platform, $44 billion. Can I say something, a little side note on this? Can New Zealand media, Steve, please stop reporting in New Zealand dollars? Because I opened up my phone this morning and it said Elon Musk buys Twitter for $66 million. I'm like, fuck me. That's a big increase from 44, but they were reporting it in New Zealand dollars. So can you stop doing that, New Zealand media? He bought it for $44 billion US dollars. And what's happening now is some in the media are reporting that enraged Twitter users react to the news that Musk now owns the social media site. Some expressed hopes that Twitter employees would launch a unionized effort. So I want to play a little clip as well, which is a conversation I had with a left-wing commentator last week on my podcast. So I asked her about Elon buying Twitter, what she thought. But first, the board's open for you guys. What do you think about this this idea, or this now reality, that Elon Musk is going to be, I guess, a sole owner of what many are describing as the public square?
Well, first of all, it says there Twitter users meltdown. I'm Twitter users. I've been afraid of this. Elon is so divisive. And he just buys things. He's just an almost cartoonish supervillain with a shit ton of money.
Petting cat.
I mean, I keep on coming back. So he spent $44 billion on this. If you cast your mind back a couple of months where he got in a Twitter argument with someone from the UN about, like, why don't they solve world hunger? And a guy came back to him and says, you can solve world hunger. Here's my plan. It'll take $6 billion. And then Elon goes radio silent and Twitter's off. So he's got money to buy Twitter. He hasn't got money to solve real problems.
He's worth about $270 billion. That's what his net worth is. So $44 billion out of that.
Up until tax day, and then he's not. So that's important too.
And he's worth.
Just note that.
Then he's worth $24 billion.
But yeah, there's also that meme that always comes up. If you criticize Elon Musk, you're just going to summon the weird Twitter supporters of him, and that is very, very true. Yeah, he bought Tesla, he bought SpaceX. He doesn't come up with stuff; he buys it. And I
It's,
think the fear with Twitter is that if he's talking about free speech, if we think about the speech that has been, well, an attempt at least to push it off Twitter, you're talking Trump, you're talking neo-Nazis and racists of all flavors, the QAnon crowd. You know, nobody's happy about those guys coming back if that's the way that he's going to go.
He founded SpaceX. But yeah, you're right about the other ones. It is interesting. It's the classic Daily Mail thing, like enraged random Twitter users when, you know, they could show actual, you know, leaders in politics or commentators or experts and their takes on it, right? But instead they show the random sort of Twitter users on it. So, for example, Elizabeth Warren says this deal is dangerous for our democracy. Billionaires like Elon Musk play
Does she
by
say
a different
why?
set of. Pardon?
Does she say why?
Hang on, I'll just keep reading. Billionaires like Elon Musk play by a different set of rules than everyone else, accumulating power for their own gain. We need a wealth tax and strong rules to hold big tech accountable. And the other one was Robert Reich. When billionaires like Elon Musk justify their motives by using freedom, beware what they actually seek is freedom from accountability.
Probably more agree with that than Warren's segue into a wealth tax. I mean, it is worrying where the two, I guess they are the two dominant social media platforms, Zuckerberg and now Elon. That feels kind of dirty to me.
Yeah, I think we need
come up
to
with
like
a new one.
we need to sort of like make it weird that these are the platforms that we use, that one man has bought one of the main platforms that we use to supposedly talk about politics or have as the public sphere. I think we need to like weirdify that, right? It's sort of like last week we were talking about, you know, streaming and sort of, you know, I started sort of noticing the things that we take for granted, which is ideology, right? That's how we can describe ideology, is the weird things that we sort of start feeling as natural, like going to Anzac Day, like we'll talk about later, or Elon Musk buying Twitter. Like that's normal. That becomes normalized, right? And naturalized.
Do you guys have any concerns for the actual platform and things changing? I mean, as some of the commentators you just showed there, George, talking about when you use freedom as a kind of coverall for why you're doing something, there could be danger there. Or it could be someone is just looking for a genuine open marketplace where even those revolting, abhorrent views get shared. I mean, you know, I'm not interested in QAnon conversations and white supremacist conversations or Donald Trump conversations. But I mean, is there any part of this which could be someone looking for
Elon Musk himself has used the platform to defame some random dude in Thailand who was trying to rescue kids, right? Called him a pedo on Twitter. I guess, I don't know, maybe that's freedom of expression or
is it going to be the Wild West? Is it going to be everything? Because I mean, I still think that I don't know this, and we talked a bit last week about and I forget which exactly the subject matter was. Oh, it was that bit we did about the Republicans and about the Republicans and about, you know, people calling people pedos. And my first reaction is always, why isn't there a lawsuit the next day? You know, if someone defamed me to a massive audience, there'd be lawyers called the very next day. There's still laws in place, and, you know, libel laws in place, etc., for things that are wrong. I wonder, A, why they don't get followed through more when it comes to social media, and B, if there was an influx of that, are people still covered to be safe, quote unquote, safe from that sort of thing because of the current laws in place?
Elon's also used Twitter to make a lot of money because of his reputation to just tweet out random stuff. It's very much like a pump and dump scheme. If he tweets something, people are going to follow what he says and buy into some nonsense like Dogecoin, or he's going to make a comment that's going to affect the Tesla share price, and then he ends up selling a whole bunch. I'd be worried about that he's just using it as a tool of wealth creation for him. The other thing is he can say nice buzzwords like freedom, but we don't actually get to see under the hood. What tweaks could he make to the algorithm that we will never ever see?
Yeah.
And what sort of speech would he actually put to the forefront? I think when a lot of these platforms, when you think about the ideals that a lot of the tech guys in the US came into with the internet and social media platforms and stuff like that, they were quite idealistic. Idealistic things are very easy to push over when you roll in with a checkbook and go, mine now.
Hey, before we jump into the next conversation about tax, this is Nomiki Konst. People may know her from the internet, from the interweb. She's a left-wing commentator based out of the US. She's on the Majority Report a lot. She was on TYT for a long time. And I had her on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. So this is obviously prior to it being sold. But I asked her what she thought about the idea of Elon buying Twitter. And she echoed actually some of the things that you guys are saying as well. Have a quick listen.
Pebbles that pop out.
we might have to catch up later in the year or something if you're up for that.
Okay,
I'd love to.
I'm down.
But I do want to, before we go, I want to ask you just about Elon Musk and Twitter. I mean, we're watching that from this side of the world. I'd like to get your take on that.
Oh my God, this guy is like a mountain. I just think that this era of billionaires, his genre, they've kind of built like, okay, yeah, they were successful in one industry, which is great, but they're not. It's like a mountain of lies. It's actually very Donald Trump. Like one good deal leads to a bunch of bullshit deals and like money laundering and tax evasion schemes. And I came up with this in marketing schemes and I hired some bots to boost this argument. And then at the end of the day, it's like a house of cards. Everyone was like, oh, well, Elon Musk is brilliant. I'm like, why? How is he brilliant? What did he do? Oh, well, electric cars that keep being pulled off the market that he didn't invent. Oh, spaceship. That's not something he invented either. He's really good at like milking the government for money to subsidize his projects that he didn't invent. Like Steve Jobs is a broken man, but he I have my schedule on this. I FaceTime with people in Libya on this. I order my eggs in the morning on this. Fascist organized revolutions on this. Leftist organized revolutions on this. YouTube shows can be hosted. Like, let me go through the things that came out of that nutty guy's mind. But that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And that guy deserved to be the richest man in the world, even though I don't even believe in capitalism. Like Steve Jobs, I'm like, all right, okay. It's worth it, even though he's a little nutty.
Yeah, so echoing some of the points you guys were saying as well, but you get the gist of what.
SpaceX and Elon Musk, I'll give him that. Like, sort of reusing rockets, reusability in space flight is massive. I think that's probably the only thing where I'll be like, yeah, good on you, Elon.
I think my criticism with him when it comes to that is this almost reputation that Elon has as an inventor. He's an investor.
Yeah,
Well,
is what he is.
But he was part of the development for PayPal, wasn't he? I mean, like George said, I mean, whatever you think of him now, you got to give him credit where credit's due. He was part of the people who invented and made PayPal.
I'm glad you brought up PayPal. Who was the other founder of PayPal?
I have no idea.
Peter Thiel.
Oh, that's right.
Who
the vampire. The Silicon Valley vampire.
Pretty much. I mean, he's a guy that has literal ties to very right-wing guys over in the US. He's also funded a very suspicious piece of facial recognition software called, I think it's Planeteer or something like that. There's some really sketchy links there that I really worry about someone like Elon talking about free speech.
Hey,
that's the same thing that he does.
We're going to have to leave it there because it's time to move on to our next subject. We can come back to this afterwards, but Louis been waiting for a bit to jump on, but it is 11:20 now, which is when we said we'd get to him. And we are going to move into the next part of the conversation, which is talking about national tax plans. And we have with us the campaigns manager from the Taxpayers Union, Louis Holbrook. Louis, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That's all right, man. I'm looking at your cool camera there. You've got like a close-up shot and a wide shot and everything going on at the same time.
Yeah, it's for big board meetings when there's multiple people. It actually does split screen, kind of like 24 with Jack Bauer, but all in our boardroom. It's not so great when it's just me though.
Yeah, but we get to see the whole room, and
Yes.
much like, and you are by yourself in a big wide room. How are you? Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming on board.
Thank you.
We wanted to talk a little bit about National Party and their tax policies, and it's really based around a conversation that was had with, I guess, Christopher Luxon in the weekend with Jack Tame. And I think what we're going to do to start off with is we're going to play sort of 90 seconds of that conversation, which is kind of the crux of part of the reason we're talking about this today. So let's all of us just enjoy 90 seconds of Mr. Luxon with Jack Tame, and then we'll come back to the conversation.
Under your tax plan, someone on the median wage in New Zealand would get about $800, $850 more a year. You as Prime Minister would get $18,000 more a year. Now, I'm going to throw a quote to you. The cost of living does disproportionately impact lower income people. That was from you. You opposed the winter energy payment. You opposed the minimum wage hike. You opposed the increase to benefits, which were all measures targeted at lower and middle income New Zealanders. But you support giving $18,000 more every year to someone on almost $500,000.
Jack, in a time of high inflation, why wouldn't you adjust your same tax system, make no more changes to it, just lift it today? I'm asking for a short-term thing that we can do to deal with inflation,
No,
right?
you're talking about the tax brackets. I'm talking about the top tax bracket that you're scrapping.
So the story on the 39%
right.
is pretty simple, which is we opposed it as it came through and the government implemented it in this parliament. And our view is very simple. We want Kiwis to be able to return to New Zealand who've got lots of skills to offer. We want migrants to be attracted here.
Let me ask this. Do you need $18,000 more a year?
I personally don't.
Okay, great.
I personally don't.
So what's
But
the
I'm
point?
telling you, when we get to the election, you'll see a fully costed tax and fiscal
Do you
plan.
think
So there you go. There's a clip of the conversation. I guess it's a conversation that's been going around the rounds, Louis. But I kind of wanted to take a step backwards first of all and go, you are a taxpayers union. That implies in its title that you want to do what's best for those of us paying tax. Would that be fair?
Yeah, well, our mission is lower taxes, less waste, and more transparency. So lower taxes, I think, is pretty clear.
Can you explain to me in a real simple way, like I'm 5 years old, what is the purpose of tax?
Well, taxes to fund the basic services that taxpayers expect. And I guess that's defined through the democratic process. Some people have a larger expectation in terms of the services that they receive, which is why a lot of the time what we do at the Taxpayers Union is highlighting examples of government spending that people don't necessarily want to fund with their tax money. And there's a lot of it out there.
Can you give us a couple of examples of that?
Yeah, sure. In the COVID-19 response, 500 million was spent on arts grants. This was part of the COVID response. There's also $1.2 billion that was spent on jobs for nature. So these are things like wallaby culling programs that the people who are employed by these programs probably do support, but it's difficult to see how that ties into a COVID-19 response.
When you say that, you guys are working on behalf of taxpayers and you're talking about like the expenditure that we don't want, you kind of said the wasted tax that we, the public, the taxpayers don't want. Who are you talking about exactly? Because I live in a part of the world where wallabies are an issue, and a part of the world in Otago where, where I do want kind of pest eradication. So when you say we don't want this, who exactly are you talking about?
It's probably fair to say I'm referring to our 170,000 subscribed supporters. So
Right.
These are people who have signed up to our mission of lower taxes, less waste, more transparency.
Right. So would that be, I mean, I'm just thinking this out loud, literally on the spot. Would that mean you're more kind of a lobby group for who you represent rather than a union for taxpayers in general?
Yeah, we call ourselves an advocacy group. In fact, we model ourselves in many ways off Greenpeace. But where Greenpeace cares about polar bears, we care about taxpayers.
You care about the taxpayers that are your part of your group, your subscribers, they're the one. Like, for example, most of the people who subscribe to you, would they be more, lower class, middle class, upper class, or class is the wrong word, income, lower income, middle income, upper income? Like, where would they sit mostly, your subscribers?
Yeah, that'd be above average. Disproportionately property owners. So rates issues are a huge issue for for us. Definitely retired people, actually. So it's people who aren't necessarily income rich, but they do have assets. They've paid a lot of tax throughout their lives, and they're concerned about impending taxes on things like property.
Gotcha. So therefore, if we take those things together, when you say you kind of represent the people who are your subscribers primarily, and your subscribers are above average income and property owners, would it be fair to say that what you kind of push for in your advocacy is the wealthier end of society, homeowners, etc., and not necessarily, let's say, the beneficiaries in the world?
Well, what we push for is our mission of
Yeah.
lower taxes, less waste, more transparency. And it's true that in terms of seeking feedback, we go to our people. We always go back to our mission. Is it in line with lower taxes, less waste, more transparency? And the reason we support that mission is because we think fundamentally that individuals can spend their money that they've earned better than elected governments who are subject
Sure.
to the whims of politics.
So why do you think it is that this National Party, based on what you've just said there about, individuals can spend their money better, is giving tax breaks in this current climate to the wealthy who don't need it, as just admitted by Mr. Luxon? He said, I don't need this money, as opposed to, dumping that 18,000 per annum onto a lower income person who desperately needs it, who then would be able to spend it, as you say, as they see fit. Why do you think the National Party is advocating for tax breaks for those who don't need it?
Well, I can't speak for Christopher Luxon, but there are very good arguments for his policy that we're actually disappointed that he's not making publicly. So we're looking at the 39% tax bracket, right? That's the somewhat controversial step that Jack Tame was focusing on. Now, removing that bracket, that just takes us back to where we were in 2017. In fact, it doesn't even quite get us back to that point. But the reason why we would support removing that bracket is because that's a marginal tax rate of 39% on any additional dollar that you earn. That has an incentive effect. So your incentive to be more productive is actually diminished by 39%. And I guess Chris Luxon did touch on the fact that we should be attracting international talent. But it's not just the 39% bracket that's the problem there. The 33% bracket, that kicks in at $70,000 of income. The 30% bracket, that kicks in at $48K. So he is right to focus on these brackets. He could probably go a little bit further.
Why do you think, and this I guess is part of your mission statement, that lower tax is better? When if you have a look at the OECD or the Western world, when the top tax breaks was ridiculously 70, 80, 90%, seems to be the time that these countries were most productive and wealthiest back in the time. So why does that equate to lower tax is better?
No, I just wouldn't accept that at all. I mean, countries are continuously getting more productive. New Zealand's certainly more productive than we were when we had taxes in the 70% range. The other thing that I'd say, though, is there is an element of tax competition internationally. If every OECD country has high taxes, then maybe that's not an issue in terms of competition. But nowadays, if we introduced a, say, 50% or 60% tax on the rich, we'd start seeing a flight of wealth from New Zealand to Australia and to Europe even, and so on.
But haven't we kind of got that now? Because taxes are cheaper in other places. They could go now and pay less tax. I mean, surely the only thing New Zealand has got is lifestyle. I mean, we can't be matched for incomes. We can't be matched for, location in the world to get to other places. None of those things we're ever going to win in. It's like, why do the All Blacks have to all play for New Zealand super franchise teams? Because it's the only way they can get that jersey. Like the jersey is dangled over them as, if you want this jersey, this black jersey, you have to stay in New Zealand. I feel like it's a bit the same with that, with our lifestyle, our location, our beaches, what we can offer that's non-financial is more likely to keep people here than an extra or fewer, tax percentage points.
I think it would be naive to rely on our lifestyle and our natural beauty alone. And countless places across the world could claim to have these attributes, but they're basket cases because they're not well managed economically. You can look at a lot of South American economies. So we absolutely do think the tax system should be used not just to attract talent, but to drive productivity. When you've got high tax rates of 30% or more, that is a killer for productivity.
Yeah, I realize that you and me are kind of dominating this conversation. I'll see if Chewy and George want to join in. Guys, you're more than welcome to. I don't want to be, I'm enjoying talking to Louis, but this is not our personal date here. You guys can jump in anytime you want as well.
The one point that I want to sort of poke you about.
You don't say poke you when I've just said date. When I've just said date, no, let's say poke you.
It always seems that there's a tax break aimed at the upper end. And yet the talking points are all talking about middle New Zealand. I'm middle New Zealand. I don't know what I'm going to do with $15 a week. I'm not interested. I'd much rather that be put into education or healthcare. I mean, the healthcare, my sister's a nurse, as an example, and she's gone right through this pandemic where they're going, oh, we'll get to your wage negotiation. We'll just get the pandemic out of the way, all the extra hours, all the extra work. We'll get to it, I promise. And then we're going to get into an election where that might go away as well. So when we're talking about tax brackets, why is it not that we adjust the middle and give more money into the pockets of more people rather than a smaller percentage at the top?
Sure. There's something of a mathematical answer to this, which is that it's actually quite cheap from a fiscal perspective to cut tax on the rich. It might seem counterintuitive because we think they pay so much tax, but there's so few of them, you can get a big bang for your fiscal buck, so to speak, by cutting that top tax bracket. Whereas if you, for example, introduced a tax-free threshold for, say, the bottom $20,000, which is something that would be very popular, that would cost many, many billions of dollars. So that's the fiscal reality of it. That said, though, what National's proposing and what we'd support, which is reversing the effects of inflation on tax brackets, that would benefit lower incomes as well. So, for example, the $48,000 tax bracket, any dollar that you earn over $48,000, you're paying 30% in marginal tax. Now, that bracket was set all the way back in 2010. In 2010, 48K was a pretty good salary. Now it's well below the average. So if we had adjusted that tax bracket for inflation, by now it would be at 59,000. Unfortunately, our National's policy doesn't quite go that far. They don't completely fix that issue, but that's something we'd support.
I think I would agree with
that situation where you've just said, though. Oh, sorry, Jay. I was just saying, you come back to that situation where you've just basically said, giving it to the few at the top won't really impact society so much, but they're also the ones that need it. And if you gave it to the many at the bottom, it would cost us more, but would impact them in society more. So really, it's just a choice, isn't it? Giving it to the ones that don't need it, that's not going to cost that much, which is what you're saying, or giving it to the ones at the bottom, which will cost a lot, but will impact their lives exponentially better. I mean, it almost sounds like a moral issue to me, but I kind of cut you off, Joey. Sorry, you jump in there.
I have gone blank on the point that I was going to make now.
Sorry, dude.
Yeah, I guess you can look at our tax system as a means of redistributing income, which I guess a lot of people do see it that way. It's not necessarily the way that we see it, but that again is it's putting a moral lens on a system that actually has an effect on productivity. So if you redistribute to the point of destroying your national productivity, everyone ends up poorer, and that's not a desirable outcome. So yeah, we should cut taxes on all levels, but not to the point where we have to increase taxes on the most productive of our society just to compensate.
I'm sorry, I don't have that.
I think that's where I'll jump in.
You go, Joey. You go, Joey.
I think that's my issue. Here in New Zealand, if you're wanting to invest and grow your money, the incentive seems to be on property, which is not productive. You've got people with massive portfolios and that sort of thing, and they're just stacking up their wages, stacking up their money, their savings, and that sort of thing until they can cash out at some point. We don't seem to have as much of, I guess, a drive here, say, compared to the United States, where you invest in a business, you build a business up, or you do the stock market or something like that. So you've just taking tax away from people that are putting their money in a piggy bank. It's not productive money. It's just like most New Zealanders make their money from selling old houses to each other.
Yeah. I'd say two things to that. Firstly is that whenever we look at taxing property, we find there are always lots of loopholes, lots of complications. You see, even the Labour government's capital gains tax proposal, that excluded the family home, which arguably defeats the point of a capital gains tax when the primary asset in New Zealand actually is the family home. So you can immediately see the political difficulties by pleasing everyone without creating all these loopholes. The other thing I'd say is that on housing specifically, a tax doesn't really answer the question of why our housing market has turned into an investment football. I mean, we'd say the real reason that people invest in housing is because housing is limited. There's a shortage of housing. When there's a shortage of something, it's like gold. It becomes a really stable asset. So maybe we should be addressing that shortage rather than trying to patch things over using our tax system.
I mean, to address that shortage, though, is a lot of government intervention. It seems to be the kind of thing that, in general, when you're talking about freedom to put your money where you want rather than government wants, to address that housing issue, to me, would seem to be, would need a lot of, let's say, government pencils put on that scale. I did want to reference one thing, though, as well. You were talking about we don't want to make everyone poor. I jotted that down. I don't have the data in front of me, so I can't really challenge that statement. But I guess I'm worried when I hear things like that, because if someone with $10 billion is made 20% poorer, they're worth $8 million, you know? If someone worth $100,000 is made 20% poorer, they're worth $80,000. And it impacts those at the bottom a lot more than those at the top. And so often in these conversations, like I agree with Chewy, you know, we get a tax break of $10 a week or $15 a week, which doesn't significantly change our lives, but pooling that amongst 2 million taxpayers could actually change something in government policy in theory. So it's I guess as always, Louis, the devil's in the details, eh? So when you say it would make us all poorer, my response, which is probably unanswerable today, is how much poorer and how would it affect those who are most vulnerable? And they're sort of the questions I would always ask.
Yeah, maybe I didn't phrase it right. I mean, the concern is, again, that tax changes have an effect on productivity. And if we destroy our national productivity, that's when everyone's made poorer. So what determines how wealthy you are or how much you earn? It's not actually, the primary determiner is not how much tax relief you personally are given. It's actually the productivity of our country as a whole and how productive you are in your hourly wage at your job. The tax system does not determine that. The tax system can reduce that level of productivity by destroying incentives. But if we want to be more productive, we need to just make sure that we're an attractive place for people to invest from overseas, and that we don't have regulations that are completely absurd that get in the way of people being productive.
Yeah. All right. I feel like we've kind of come full circle back here to about productivity versus what you guys are doing. Someone's just mentioned this though as well. A couple of comments that have come while we've been talking, Louis. Empress says, my incentive to earn 61% more is higher than the disincentive. So earning 61 cents out of the dollar is better than not doing it and earning 0 cents in the dollar, I guess is what they're saying. And a-hole atheist just said, just did the math. This guy represents 4.5% of eligible voters. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's the case. But
every day.
It is interesting to think about that. And, you know, I hear taxpayers union and I think about unions as often representing the vulnerable, those who are in need, you know, the Amazon workers or that kind of stuff. But from this conversation today, it seems what we've clarified, what I've clarified for me, is the people that you're representing. I'm not saying this is bad. This is just this is what you've told us are wealthier, typically property owners, and subscribe to your services. The right word, your ideas, that thing as well.
Yeah,
which
they feel represented by us.
But yeah, but for me, puts a different spin now. For me, no, I'm not saying you guys are spinning. You guys have been honest and blunt about it, but puts a different criteria around when I receive, and I do receive stuff from you guys and read it, thinking, well, this is looking after wealthy homeowners. This is who these people are mostly speaking for. So yeah, but look, it's been great talking to you.
If I can just add a final word, I would say that we do what we do because we believe in it, and the fact that we've found 170,000 people who are willing to sign up to our cause, regardless of what income bracket they're in, that's great. Yeah. That's great from our perspective. For me, I just feel privileged to be able to do my job, to fight for causes that I believe in this case, smaller government, more freedom, lower taxes, and so on. So it's not as though I have wealthy people ringing me up telling me what to do.
Oh, look, no, don't get this. Don't get me twisted. I'm not, that wasn't any kind of criticism or jab at the end. It was just
I just wanted to get that on the record.
Yeah, but let me just say, okay, well, we're about to wrap up and we do need to go because we've got the president of the RSA coming on shortly, but let me just leave us all with this. And look, I won't cut you off, Lou, if you want to respond to it. I do think, and I've said this before on the show, the idea of smaller government is bullshit. It's a bullshit argument because no one should be advocating for bigger government or smaller government. We should all be advocating for better government. So this idea that smaller government is better is utter horseshit. In my opinion, nothing to do with you because a lot of people say it. Because sometimes bigger government is needed. And I used the example just the other day of in the US when the BP oil refinery blew up, you know, the staff had been reduced there, the inspectors had been reduced to one worker for all the oil refineries. That was an instance where that government department needed to be bigger. It didn't need to be smaller. Smaller is not always better. What's better is better. And I really would hope that groups out there who are using that would change their verbiage and start advocating for better government, not smaller government, because smaller government's not all, it is the answer sometimes, but it's not always the answer. You can respond if you want to that, because that's my thoughts.
Not always the answer. We'd say often the answer. But otherwise, let's not get down into the rabbit hole.
All right, Louis. Hey, look, thanks so much for joining us. The campaigns manager for the Taxpayers Unions, Louis Holbrook. Louis, hopefully we'll talk to you again, especially in the lead up to the election. I'm sure this will be a hot button issue, and it would be really good to have a chat with you again about these things. All right, thanks, mate. Appreciate that all the time. You guys, I monopolized all that time. RSA is coming up. If you want to jump in now, you go for it while I eat my mandarin.
I'll go be honest. I didn't agree with everything they said, but he did make some good points that I was unaware of. I don't like the Taxpayers Union as an organization because they're not a union; they're a lobby group. But I'm glad that we got him rather than Jordan.
Oh, I spoke to Jordan yesterday. I'll be perfectly happy to have Jordan on. Yeah, it's not. I never set anyone up on this show because I want to have a crack or anything. It's these conversations that are going on, and we want to have open and honest dialogue. And I think that was a really good, honest conversation.
Oh, 100%. I thought it was really good.
You know, we need to be able to have these conversations honestly and openly, and yeah, seek clarity along the way.
It's quite interesting when you've got someone that you're, I guess, quite diametrically opposed, like fundamentally opposed to their angle. But then, you know, he did say some things of like, okay, I can see why you're coming at it this way. I disagree with it, but yeah, I can see the foundation of what you're talking about.
When the metric is like productivity, that's the thing they go back to, then yeah, he's going to be able to find a way to argue for how to increase productivity. But as Chewy says, my principles are absolutely opposed to it. It is cool to, like, I guess, just, and Pat did this, get him to explain what the Taxpayers Union is, because they do get used in the 6 o'clock news and the media a lot without that context, that they're a that they're a lobby group for the wealthy, and have these. I mean, you know, I would have asked him if their sort of principle. You know, he mentioned the arts grants thing. I sometimes wonder if it's more than just, we spend, in their perspective, a lot of money on something like that, on the arts grants, or if they have actually a problem with arts grants in and of themselves. I get because art is not productive. Exactly.
Which is not true. Like, I mean, art is an important part of culture.
I think he's just, it's on a different plane of reality to constantly use productivity as the metric of like, we shouldn't have to argue that arts grants are productive using his terms. We should use our own concepts of what we value. We shouldn't try and we shouldn't have to do this, gymnastics of, like, working out how the input to arts grants, has more output economically. It should just be the right thing to do. I think that's sometimes where we sort of fall short. We start using the terms and definitions that people like Louis have put in the media and the discourse, rather than thinking of our own way to conceptualize these things.
Well, and that's why I wanted him to drill down into what he was saying it was.
Yeah.
Because I'm okay with providing grants for killing wallabies and out there and protecting our environment. So when he says we're providing, we're representing taxpayers, like, well, that's not me. But the other thing always makes me laugh when people talk about sort of the arts and putting money in there. Like, how many hundreds of millions of dollars do you think Peter Jackson has brought into this economy? Like, and he would have received in his early days money and grants and that kind of stuff from the government to make his little bad taste films and that kind of stuff. And so it's like, it's just not as black and white. It's not what it's about. But look, It was a good chat, and it's time to move into our next conversation because we have joining us the national president. I think we have to sit up straight, boys, and be on our best behaviour because we have the national president of the RSA coming on, BJ Clark. BJ, good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Actually, it's me sitting up straight to talk to you guys.
Lovely to have you with us. Thank you so much. Obviously, yesterday being Anzac Day, we thought it would be great to catch up with the RSA and have a bit of a chat about, Anzac Day in general and what it's all about. Maybe you could do that for us because obviously Anzac Day, from when it started, has sort of evolved a bit into what it is today. So if I was an alien landing on the planet and had never heard of Anzac Day before, how would you describe it to me, BJ?
Well, I suppose we go back to its origins. Obviously, it's from Gallipoli, the landing at Gallipoli when Anzac, the Australian New Zealand Army Corps, when they both together served on the battlefields in Gallipoli. And so Anzac Day was started as a remembrance of the bravery of the service of those veterans. And unfortunately, they said that the World War I was the war to end all wars, and we all know that it hasn't been and won't be for some time by the look of things. However, it's also become an important part of just acknowledging all those that have served New Zealand in the armed forces who have lost their lives, and even those that came back who have been affected either physically or mentally. So, and also I think what we try to encourage is that we should also remember that we have people every day today serving overseas. And so on Anzac Day, we should also acknowledge them. So it's an acknowledgement of the service of all of those in our three armed services.
And how was the actual celebrations yesterday? Where are you based and what did you get up to?
I'm actually based in Christchurch, but I was at Wellington for the services at Pukeahu. The dawn service, well done Wellington. A massive number of people attending there. It was the sea of faces as you looked out into the public arena it was great. The 11 o'clock service, a bit smaller, but again, well supported. And then I also attend a service on the Wellington Heads at the Ataturk Memorial with the Turkish people, and that's also an amazing service. A country who we tried to invade, who actually, and frankly, kicked our butts, whose leadership acknowledged our service people as their brothers, and that they'll always remember them. And so the link between the Turkish people and the New Zealand people is still as strong as it ever was.
BJ, I was thinking back to past Anzac days, possibly when, I guess with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, war is fresh in our minds, but I'm thinking back to past Anzac days when maybe New Zealand was more involved in Afghanistan or Iraq, for example. And often we saw this debate in public discourse around what Anzac Day means, right? Is it a day, and you can tell us your opinion on this, is it a day for that sort of solemn reflection and a reminder of not forgetting? Or should it be sort of a day where we can have those conversations possibly about New Zealand's role in the world contemporarily?
I think it's both. I think you should be able to have those conversations that you talk about at any time. And that's exactly why our service personnel went overseas, was to enable people to have conversations. And I'll expand on that a little bit shortly. But it certainly is a time of reflection. It's a time where family members remember their forebears who served. For me, I go to an Anzac parade and I see the grandchild or great-grandchild of a veteran who's on that parade carrying granddad's or great-granddad's medals, and I think that's amazing. So what we do need, I think, is to ensure that we keep discussing with our young people what it's all about. Anzac Day, let's be very clear, is not about glorifying war. It should never be. It's about remembrance. There's no one, You won't find anyone at an Anzac service that wants to glorify war. But the interesting thing, you talk about debate. I think debate can be around those subjects that are akin to Anzac Day. But I have to say that I was, I'll use a polite term, angered, to find there were certain elements of the public who wanted to use their platform to gain some publicity on Anzac Day. And that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen on any event. Those veterans went so that you could have your opinion, you could put it out there, but you don't do it on a day of reflection, which is all about the veteran.
To clarify, BJ, you're talking about the so-called sheriffs that are up in Paraparaumu.
Them, and there are others around the country. There was a slight disruption at Pukeahu at the 11 o'clock service. There was threats in a couple of other places. But, you know, let them have their day on their own platform. But, you know, so, you know, you'd say, so why are you choosing Anzac Day? And the reality is it's because they know there will be a lot of media around, and they're hoping that will enhance their platform. And I'm so pleased that the media really didn't give it a lot of attention.
I am a very firm believer in that Anzac Day is an anti-war thing. Certainly for myself. I've had relatives fight in France both times. And in 2015, I traveled right throughout Europe, and Gallipoli and Italy and Crete, to all of these places that New Zealanders had fought in those theatres. I find it really interesting that there are people that consider it a commemoration, almost like a national mourning or a start of the New Zealand becoming its own its own entity, its own country, rather than an extension of the empire. But I worry sometimes as we get further and further away that it becomes more of a just straight patriotic, as you said, a glorification. I see that a bit in Australia, and I hope that doesn't come in over here. Be interested in your thoughts on that.
Look, you know, I acknowledge and respect your position, and I think again, I have got no problems with that. If we want to get everyone thinking the same way, then we become a robot country, and so everyone again should have the opportunity to express their issues. However, what I don't want to see is, as happened in Paraparaumu, where we are holding a service to acknowledge in whichever way that those attendees wish to, the service of those around the country, and it is interrupted by people with another agenda. You know, that's all that worries me. You know, everyone is entitled to their opinion. You know, through New Zealand's involvement in Vietnam, there was this country was torn apart by people on their opinions of whether we should have been there or not. And let's not forget, it's not the service personnel that are there that have the choice. They're sent there, and so you know that's when they sign up. They sign up to go wherever they're told, so they do it. But the treatment of our veterans, particularly when they come back from Vietnam, was nothing less than an embarrassment to this country. And a number of those veterans who then retreated into areas of New Zealand where you don't see a lot of the light of day, whether it be up the east coast of the North Island or the west coast of the South Island, and they were severely affected. I mean, they were brought in at night undercover. Some of them were embarrassed. Well, not embarrassed. Some of them didn't wear their medals because of the reaction it got from people. They were called all sorts of names. And that's not acceptable. Those people were just doing the job they were sent away to do. But then on the other side of that, what we as a country have a responsibility to do is look after those veterans as they come back. Many of them were affected not only physically but mentally. And that mental stress, brought in things like alcoholism and mistreatment of their family, and there's no denying that. So the whole picture of Anzac Day is more than remembrance, but that is what we should be doing. We should acknowledge our veterans for the service they do, and now we are concentrating very much on the younger veterans, as you said, Afghanistan, Timor, the Solomons. We've just sent some people over and to support of what's happening in the Ukraine. Now, whilst that might be a bit of a benign operation, we sent 9 intelligence personnel across there. And so you've got to remember that they may well be dealing with images and making decisions that are going to be very difficult for them. And whilst that's not declared as an operational deployment, we don't know what effect that will have on them mentally down the track on the decisions that they make or what they see. So it's a really big picture. And that's the whole thing about Anzac Day. It isn't just one thing. It's an opportunity for individuals who have lost family members or had family members to remember them. And it's an opportunity for those that serve to get together again to talk about, what they got up to when they were away. And that very rarely is about, the glorifying war. It'll be things like, hey, remember when you got that Land Rover, went into town and flogged that bottle of wine and a couple of chickens to make the evening meal a little bit better, or when we went and had a great time and wherever and chatted up a couple of ladies or whatever. It's and remember our mates that are gone, whether it was in service or that have gone since that service. So it's a time for catch up. Some of those guys don't see each other for from one Anzac Day to the other, and it's an opportunity for them to say, mate, are you okay? And you're not looking too good. I think you should contact your local RSA and see if they can help you. Those are the things about Anzac Day. It's quite a wide thing.
BJ, thanks for joining us. I just want to finish with one quick question. It probably feels natural to wrap the conversation now, but I did want to ask you one thing. And here in Dunedin, we've got a statue of this man in our centre city, Archibald Baxter. And I was just interested as I was hearing you talk, and especially about it not being a place to glorify war. How does the RSA think of, and what do the members kind of think of the pacifism message and those conscientious objectors who refused to fight? I'm not even asking necessarily for an official position, but how are the people who maybe are in our history who have been the conscientious objectors, how are they kind of thought of and treated by the RSA?
To be honest, I've never raised that discussion or had that discussion, and maybe that's something that to enhance my my knowledge I should have. And I think probably if I look at some of the historical reading that I've seen, I think at the time I think they were treated harshly. Because it was expected that you went down the road and signed up, and I think anyone who didn't, was probably treated quite harshly. And I think now it's been a long time since people have had to make a decision or express that they are a conscientious objector, because we haven't had mass recruitment to go to a war. So an interesting one you raise. I remember there's a movie, and I can't remember what it was, about a gentleman who joined the American forces, and he didn't want to carry a rifle. That's it.
Hacksaw Ridge.
Yeah, and he was treated poorly because he didn't want to carry a rifle and be a soldier on the front line. And yet that man, through being a medic, his heroism is just it's unparalleled. It was amazing.
Yeah. And that little man grew up to be Spider-Man. No, it's just the actor who played him. So, hey, BJ, thanks for joining us. Really do appreciate you giving us some time this morning. I'm sure you're very sought after in these sort of couple of days in particular. So I really appreciate you give our little conversation some time. National President of RSA, BJ Clark. BJ, thanks for joining us. Really do very much appreciate your time.
Kia ora, guys, and have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
Thanks,
See ya.
AJ.
Now, also, Chewy, I get the feeling we still want to. Do you want? If you want to continue, I'm not necessarily stopping the conversation around Anzac Day because you had some stuff that you were going to talk about. You can. We're still happy to stick around for a few minutes and do that because there's one more thing I want to mention as well. So if you've still got stuff you want to bring up, feel free.
So just something that BJ said there about stories. My great grandfather, he served in World War II and was captured somewhere in the Mediterranean. Because he never really talked about these things, the family doesn't have a lot of knowledge. It was very general. He was captured somewhere in Greece or Crete or somewhere. He spent some time in a prisoner of war camp somewhere in Germany. And the only stories that we really had that got relayed from person to person was that he had escaped multiple times, which sounds very impressive.
Come on, Bruce.
He escaped to go to the pub. He stole a guard's bike and rode into the local tavern and had a couple of beers while he waited for people from the camp to come and pick him up again. But because of my interest in...
Feel like Hogan's Heroes, bro.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a very different movie. But yeah, because of my interest in, I guess, general war history and that sort of thing, I've been trying to find out more about him. It basically just started with a photo and some very rough information. And over the years found out, well, the key piece of information for me is where in Germany was the prisoner of war camp. And I found out that it was a place where most New Zealanders ended up when they were captured. It was called Stalag 18A, and it was in the southern part of Austria. And of course, there's a Facebook group for everything, right? So I found that Facebook group and started to share information. And from that point, I got his service number. And then my mum dug out a photo, which I think I've got on the screen share if you want to put it up. And I put that up on the group. You know, here's my great-grandfather, George Taylor. Here's his service number. And one of the people in the group came back with an enormous amount of information just from that. From when he signed up, where he lived here in Dunedin, the unit that he was with, and the fact that the story that we all had that he was probably captured in Crete was wrong. That he was captured earlier in a place called Kalamata, which is a very well-researched battle. So now I have a better understanding of what he would have gone through. I've been to this place in Austria. I've seen where the camp is. The museum there has a lot of information about that. And then from there, I've pieced together other bits of information. Like, I guess the assumption is once the war finished, these guys all came home, right? He was in Scotland for another 3 years before they could find a ship to put the New Zealanders on to get them back. Can you imagine what that would have been like? That the war's over, you want to go home to see your family. And, oh, sorry, I haven't got room on the ship. We'll get round to it. So he spent most of his time in Scotland fighting with Royal Navy sailors and getting arrested and then getting put back in the barracks and then repeating that for a good couple of years. But when he came back, he never talked of his experience apart from that story of breaking out of a prison camp to go to the pub. I put this information up on Twitter the other day, and I've had my uncles hitting me up going, we never knew any of this.
Wow.
So I think that's a really important part of Anzac as well, because a lot of these guys don't talk about this, or the family history gets muddled or confused or that sort of thing. These guys came back, a lot of cases, very, very damaged. And they just didn't talk about their feelings unless they were with their own people, the people that had been through it and understood what they were talking about.
It does make you think about that generation. I mean, like, we're in a generation now where you can't fucking shut people up, and they'll share everything from their breakfast to whatever, no matter what, you know, all over the place. Like they've just climbed Mount Everest. Look at my eggs that I made. And that was in a generation that actually probably should have talked about everything for their own health and just didn't. It's interesting, like in the space of 100 years, not even for some of them, the difference that, you know, a 20-year-old or 25-year-old, not to beat up on the millennials, is today versus going through that stuff.
Well, when
it might be testament to how little we have to worry about today and what the serious nature of what we actually go through today is versus those men.
When I reached drinking age, I got a very intense, serious conversation from my grandmother that was just, she was really worried about how I would be around alcohol.
Yeah.
And just connecting the dots and all of these little stories and that sort of thing. And talking to some of my uncles and that sort of thing. George here came back a very angry drunk. And I think that was the whole thing. You just had to bottle so much up.
Yeah.
And you come back in that period in New Zealand, you got 6 o'clock closing and all of that good stuff for mental health and domestic violence and that sort of thing. But to see that manifesting in my grandmother, just really worried that I'd somehow head down the same path as her dad.
Yeah.
When those pieces slotted into place, it was like, oh shit, just multi-generational damage.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, look, thanks for sharing, Chewy. That's an amazing story. I was gonna, if we're done there also, I just wanted to acknowledge, speaking of fallen comrades and stuff, someone who we lost over the weekend that you guys might not have a connection to, but I certainly do. Former colleague of mine, Newstalk ZB, Bruce Russell. I worked with Bruce for 7 years. We were mid-dawn compadres. He'd do 3 mornings a week. I'd do 4 for a period of that time. So pretty spectacular human being, pretty spectacular broadcaster. And listening to Newstalk ZB yesterday, hearing, including me, I phoned up Newstalk ZB to talk, hearing stories for 18 hours of the day. This is a mid-dawn host who keeps people, company overnight and one Saturday evening show. And you can just see how much that middle of the night slot really impacts people. And sadly, on Sunday night, he came to work and he was feeling a little bit tired and he had a little nap and never woke up before he was about to go on and do his shift. And, mostly obviously feeling for his family, his wife and his son, but obviously, one of the young producers found him in the offices after he'd passed. So it was a real shock. And one of my friends, Tim Roxburgh, who is also a former colleague at ZB and a guy who started on overnights now doing other stuff, shared this video in the weekend. And I thought,
Brucey, show us.
I thought it was a lovely little
You can do it,
piece.
Brucey.
So there's Bruce when he was.
Yeah, actually, it's not built for. No.
It appears as though not.
No,
Are you taking video?
I am taking video.
Oh.
Come on, Brucey.
Come
on,
here we go. Brucey.
Whoa! Oh, you're doing so well.
But so many people who are doing radio today, from the Tim Roxburghs to the Mark Dye on Today FM to all these people, did that stint with Bruce, was his offsider for a period of time. And he was in his early 70s, but still obviously lost him unexpectedly. And I just wanted some space as well to acknowledge a different kind of war, talkback war, overnight talkback war, but other fallen comrades that happened over the weekend, because it was a pretty big shock to everybody, especially his audience. He was the kind of guy who had the most loyal audience in the world. Like, honestly, you guys understand media and understand radio, that you typically, and for people don't, sorry to ruin the mystique of radio, but even on a music station, you tune in because of the announcers, not necessarily because of the music, because you can get the music anywhere. So primarily the announcers you have a relationship with. The relationship with his audience was, I reckon he had literally, and I'm not doing this because he's just passed, but the most loyal listeners in the country of anybody. And there was tears and from people phoning up ZB yesterday, and much like, I just wanted to acknowledge him today and, say he'll be missed, and thoughts and prayers, as we say, go out to people. So there you go. Here's my bit.
Yeah. No, it's important stuff. Talkback is a strange beast. Even as someone looking to get into broadcasting, it was Talkback Radio that really plugged my interest. And that as you said, that late night slot, there's nothing else like it.
Yeah. Well, we had 100,000 listeners to those shows, so it wasn't small either when you compare that to, it's small compared to, network daily shows,
Mm.
but it's bigger than any like local show, 10 times bigger than any show in Dunedin, and for a local only show. So it was a significant audience too for what it was. So yeah, I just wanted to put out there. I called up ZB yesterday in the 9 o'clock hour because they were talking about him, and spoke to Tim Beveridge is another guy who works there now, it's like Bruce had, it wasn't necessarily that Bruce trained us all, but he was the other guy when a bunch of us went through, and he was the other guy for more than 20 years. And he was a newsreader, and he did a Saturday evening show. They joked about him sort of sleeping in the rafters because he was always at ZB. They obviously had a cot somewhere and he never left because he was always there and always working. So along with that stuff today, I also wanted to just acknowledge him and say it publicly again that he will be missed on this day. It's appropriate. All right, team. I think we're done. Is there anything else we want to wrap up with? Anything else we want to get out there?
No, just that the show could be 3 hours long if you let us go.
Yeah, I know. And actually, it's the kind of thing that a few times me and George have gone, let's keep this close to an hour, and at 12:30 we're still talking an hour and a half into it. So we won't do that today. There are a few other comments that have come in speaking about the tax group. Accountability for government spending is a better way of thinking about it rather than smaller government. Honestly, it's that smaller government thing drives me wild because it's just a trope. Someone says he is ironically defending people that provide little actual productivity.
Yep.
He's defending the people. Like, I watch a terrible show on Netflix called Selling Sunset. It's a terrible show about real estate agents. But what I realized about real estate agents, and this, if you're a real estate agent, I honestly don't mean to offend you, but I'm probably going to, what I'm about to say, is a real estate agent is a perfect example of someone who gets and makes money with no real skill set. Because what they do is they take an artist's piece of work, they take the architect's piece of art, and they find the successful person with money to buy that piece of art, and their skill is connecting them. They're not the artist, and they don't have the kind of money to buy the place. They sit in the middle as a kind of go-between. And there are so many people out there who have money and in their roles and in their work do very little as actual productivity comment was making, but aren't actually the ones who are being productive. There's a saying that it wasn't the people who found the gold in the gold rush that made the money. It was the one that sold the shovels. So not the people doing the hard work, or not the people manufacturing the shovels. It was the ones in the middle, kind of taking that artist's piece of work, making a shovel, and giving it to that person doing the hard graft. The ones in the middle that were making the money. And they're often the people who don't have the actual productivity that I wonder if they fit into that criteria. Just wondering. Righty ho.
I would love to contribute to that, but
go.
I'm sorry.
No,
I've got to go. But real estate agents are my pet peeve.
All right. Thanks,
so
team,
we'll
for
have
joining
to
us.
pick it up.
We'll pick it up. We'll see you again tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. Thanks, team. All right, guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Cheers.